a risk system in its essence is just monitoring how much we're lending out and making sure that that is not growing to a huge proportion that is too much too much of a bet for us.
From a risk perspective, at a very conceptual level, I understand what the word risk means, and I could make guesses on like what risk would mean in the context of building a system that's executing trades on behalf of client requests. But maybe, for someone who's not that familiar with this space, like from a technical architecture perspective, like what is it? How does risk fit into that thing? Like what is risk engineering in the context of the business?
Okay, sure. So we'll go back to the example that I used of a mortgage. I'm sure you're very familiar with how mortgages work. You go to your bank, you put up some amount of equity in the first place, a down payment, and then they will lend you the rest to operate, to buy the house. It's the same concept at a prime broker, except that the amount that's being lent has to be monitored constantly. So you can think of it as we are doing a credit check on the investors on an ongoing basis to make sure that they are still worthy of the loan that we're giving them and that they are able to repay us. And at the same time, the trading activity they do changes the amount of borrowed funds, right? It's not like a mortgage where it's stagnant, whereas this, you're trading day to day, so you're going to affect how much the equity you put up and how much is being lent. So a risk system in its essence is just monitoring how much we're lending out and making sure that that is not growing to a huge proportion that is too much of a bet for us. And that's essentially what all of the risk calculations we do boil down to. It's to make sure that the margin, which is the amount of money that the client has to put up with us to make sure that similar to a loan to value in a mortgage, is within a certain range for us. And every system so there are different ways to assess this risk, and that brings about with it a different set of challenges for how you compute it. At the simplest level, FINRA has a set of rules that say if you come in and buy this much stock, then you have to put up this much as an initial margin. And then on an ongoing basis, they have a set of targets, thresholds that you have to keep hitting. And that calculation is very simple. It's just a flow chart, and you get a number at the end that you send as the margin requirement to your client. On the more complex side, when you have a client that's trading a larger book, what we do is something called stress scenarios. So you basically take a client's portfolio and you revalue it by changing small things inside the portfolio. That would be things like the price of each of the securities in the portfolio, or the volatilities. So you're changing all of these aspects to see how that portfolio performs under worse market conditions. So that's essentially what you're doing. You're building up a matrix of different scenarios that you think might happen that could cause a downfall in that portfolio, and taking the worst case as this is what we think could happen if the market goes down tomorrow. So you need to put up this much in security to compensate, to make sure that you have a buffer to combat that scenario.